Thank you for letting me do this presentation today. My name is Andy Stewart. My call sign is Kilo Bravo 1, Oscar, India, Quebec, and I live in Massachusetts. And it's my privilege today to do a presentation to the RATPAC folks. And I'm very thankful to have been invited back from a presentation that I did, perhaps a little over 2 years ago. So tonight, I'm going to discuss Andy's Ham Radio Linux, and I'm the person who created it, and I want to share a bunch of things about this with you. So first off, a little bit of biographical information about me. I've been in the hobby since 2007 and ultimately earned my extra class license. I was a club president for 10 years in this area. I used to help out with the section a few years ago, both as an assistant section manager and as the affiliated club coordinator. I founded my first Linux users group back in 1997, and I'm happy to say that that group is still going strongly today. I also founded a Linux meetup group on meetup.com that ran for about 14 years, and unfortunately COVID killed that. And I did some Linux instruction at our adult education program here the next town over when I lived in Chelmsford. I did that for quite a few years and had a great time with that. I've been using Linux since 1997. I don't run Apple operating systems or Windows or anything else. I'm exclusively a Linux user. And I'm recently retired as a computer engineer. My most recent employer was NVIDIA, where I spent 14 years at the tail end of my career doing digital logic verification using computer simulation techniques. And that was very fun and challenging, and I enjoyed it. So most recently, what are my current interests? This is such a wide hobby, many facets to it. I'm having fun restoring antique radios, especially those from the 1920s and the 1930s. I've done about a dozen of them, and I've got a 1938 Philco on the bench right now with a new tube ready to go in it, and hopefully that solves the problem. I also recently joined a makerspace since I have more time now that I'm retired. I wanted to hang out with intelligent, geeky, creative folks, and the makerspace is certainly one way to do that. And a project that I will do there tied in with my radio restoration work is to learn how to use the laser cutter. And I want to build a wooden box for a late 1940s FM radio chassis that someone gave me. The radio works, I never got the wooden box with it. So I'm going to build an enclosure for it to protect it and allow it to be more easily used. Fox hunting has always been fun for me, both hiding the fox and going after it. We have a pretty active community of folks here who do that. And more recently, I've been doing some POTA activations at a couple of local parks and having fun doing that as well. And of course, I get into Andy's Ham Radio Linux. I've done it for many years to keep it out there for the user community. And most recently, I was asked by the ARRL Teachers Institute to put in a few pieces of software to help meet their needs. And this release has that code in there. So what am I really trying to do here? I want to promote Linux, of course. I think it's the way to go, but there are lots of other choices out there, and each of us has to make our own decision. But this is also a way that I give back to ham radio and the Linux communities by doing this work and putting it out there for people to use. This most recent version, you run it on top of an existing Linux distribution, which is not the way it was always done, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. I wanted to create a software collection containing as much ham radio software as possible. Nothing proprietary, everything is free and open source software. And the goal, and it's a lofty one, is that everything just works. Now, on any computer, that's kind of a wish, but that's the goal, because I want folks to use the computer as a tool to focus on the radio hobby, not have yet another computer that's doing frustrating things that diminish from that. So that's where the ideas for Andy's Ham Radio Linux started. So Andy's Ham Radio Linux is the name that I've given it. I'm an engineer. I'm not a marketing person, so I figured I would just give it that name. And it's this collection of ham radio software found on the internet. And I've collected it all into one place for the user community. And as I mentioned, everything is free or open source or equivalently licensed. I've packaged it for what I think is easy installation. And now multiple Linux flavors are supported. I'll go into that a little bit. And Raspberry Pi is a new addition to the things that are supported in Andy's Ham Radio Linux. I've customized the menus and organized them in a way that I think users will find it easier to use this way. So what did I do in the past? For about 12 or 13 years, it was a version of Xubuntu, or some people would say Xubuntu. It was a remastered version of that. And that was all well and good. A lot of people downloaded it and used it, but it was limiting in many ways. It wasn't easy for users to customize it unless they had a bit more expertise with Linux. It was only one flavor of Linux. It didn't support all these other flavors that are out there. And every release was handcrafted. And I used to say that it was, New England, high quality hand craftsmanship, but it was also very tedious and time consuming to do. And there was no documentation of what I did or how I did it. And sometimes I would forget from version to version what I did to make something work. So I'd have to put in more effort to relearn that. And nobody else would have been able to recreate it because I didn't document it. And that's not fair to the community. The ISO file that I ultimately created was huge. It was around 5 gigabytes and growing. And a few people started to complain that that was too big to download. And there was really no upgrade path between versions of AHRL. I would say to people, start fresh and install the new version and then restore your home directory. And many people did that, but I thought about it and said, couldn't I make this easier in some way? So here's what I do now, starting with version 26, which came out in August, I think, of last year. The first thing you do is you install a supported flavor of Linux and customize in any way you want. And then download and install Andy's Ham Radio Linux. And after you do that, we hope that everything just magically works. And after that, have fun with the new software that you've installed. After all, this is a hobby and we want to have fun. I will go into some more details in a little bit, but that's the high level gist of what I'm hoping that I've accomplished here. So what did I change to try to meet some of these goals and challenges? Well, the first thing I did for version 26 is I created an installation script. It's a bash script, and people who know how to read that language can just look at it. It's a text file, and it serves as documentation of what's going on, and it's customizable. So if you know how to program in bash, you can go in there, and I have hooks that should be pretty obvious to the reader as to what to do to say, install the things that are here. No, there's a few things I don't want, customize that out, and so forth. And then run the installation script and you'll get what you asked for. The file that I distribute is a much smaller gzipped tar file. It's about 600 megabytes. That's a far cry shorter or smaller than the 5 gigabyte file that was being distributed. And multiple Linux flavors are supported. Now, when I say supported, what I mean is I've actually tested these and they appear to work. That doesn't mean that AHRL won't work somewhere else. It probably will, but I can't promise that since I haven't tested it. So these are the ones I've tested. And you can see the list there. Debian Live was tested. Both Xubuntu, Kubuntu, and Vanilla Ubuntu have been tested. Linux Mint, and of course, Raspberry Pi OS. And for updates, what I'm saying to people is, when I come out with a new version of Andy's Ham Radio Linux, just install it on top of the old version. And I did that, and I mistakenly left a couple of menu files there by mistake. It needs a tiny bit of cleanup, but all the programs work as you would expect. So now that you know what it is and what I'm trying to accomplish here, you're going to ask me, what kind of a computer does it run on? Well, any 64-bit machine that's, let's just say 10 years old or less, a new one works too, or a Raspberry Pi 4 or a Pi 5. For memory, an absolute minimum of 2 gigabytes. The install will work with that, but your mileage will vary as to whether or not 2 gigabytes is enough to actually run the programs that you care about. I recommend 8 gigabytes as a minimum, and if you have more than that, fantastic. For AHRL, after you do the install, it uses an additional 10 gigabytes of disk space. That doesn't include whatever your Linux distribution took for storage. This is 10 gigabytes on top of that. You need a functioning network because some of the installation will do updates and other things that require the network to work. And some folks have asked me about VirtualBox. I do the development of this in VirtualBox to see that the menus work, the correct programs start, and all of that. But some people have trouble in VirtualBox getting USB to work and getting it to talk to a real ham radio. You could do it that way. If you can figure out how to make that work, that might be a good platform for you to kick the tires and see if you want to install this on your computer more permanently. Other folks will find an old laptop that perhaps doesn't meet the specifications of other operating systems, and they'll put Linux on it and use it as a ham radio only laptop. And that works very well for people as also. So where do you obtain Andy's Ham Radio Linux? Well, go to the website SourceForge. It's www.sf.net, or you can spell out SourceForge entirely, and search for Andy's Ham Radio Linux. And you'll find the software and the README files and all of that kind of thing there. The most recent version as of today is version 26C, which I released about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. And when you go to that website, you'll see the big green download button. If you just click that, you will get the latest and greatest version of the tar-g zip file. But you also need the Getting Started document. And I've got a link that shows you how to get there and a couple of screenshots in a minute. The Getting Started document is very important to read. Those are all of the instructions on how to install this, the specific versions that are supported, how much memory, and if there's any workarounds or known problems. So please be sure to download it. It's just a text file. Make sure you read it and save a copy. So when you go to the SourceForge website, this is what part of it looks like. And there's the big green download button. Click that and you'll get the most recent version. But you still need the Getting Started file. So you can see that header there, the tabs rather, where it says Summary and Files, Reviews, and so forth. If you click on Files, you'll get to a screen that looks like this. And it's bigger than that. But you can see down below where there's version 26C, 26B, 26A, and so forth. You always want to get the latest and greatest version. So in this case, that's version 26C. And if you click that where it says v26c, you will get this screen. And you can see down below the green box that says download latest version, it says home/v26c. So you know you're in the right place. And there's a few files there. Now, some people don't download the Getting Started guide, so I put it there under 3 different names, README, README Text, and README First. And you'd be surprised how many people still don't read it despite all of that. Please take a look at it. It's only a couple of pages, and it's very helpful. Sometimes people ask me what are the differences between versions. The changes file contains the high level differences. And someone else also asked me for a list of the software that Andy's Ham Radio Linux includes. And I have a text file there called software, which has that information. So if you don't download anything else, at least get the Getting Started guide, but other things are there, which I know people have asked for. So you read the Getting Started guide, you follow the instructions, you reboot the computer, and then if everything has gone correctly, you can peruse the menus and see what's there. Now, one thing I noticed about these different versions of Linux, some of them support multi-level menus where you can go to the Andy's Ham Radio Linux menu and slide over to the antenna menu and slide over to the applications and so forth. That's what I'm calling multi-level menus. And you can see where Raspberry Pi OS, Xubuntu, and Debian Live support that. But some of them do not. Linux Mint does not, and Kubuntu does not. You get one menu that says Andy's Ham Radio Linux, and everything is in alphabetical order underneath that. I don't know how to address that issue or if you even can, but I just wanted to point that out. Everything is in there. It's just not organized the way that I would have preferred. So I've got some quick screenshots here. This is from my Raspberry Pi 5, which has 8 gigabytes of memory. And you can see where the Andy's Ham Radio Linux menu is highlighted. And then the menu to the right of that is all of the different submenus. And we will go through these very quickly. I tried to organize things in a way that made sense to me, but these programs might also be in a different menu. So you can see where it says Andy's Ham Radio Linux, and just below that it says electronics, and below that it says ham radio. Some of the programs are in multiple menus, and I think that's okay because we might think differently about how it should be organized. This is a quick screenshot of Xubuntu with the Andy's Ham Radio Linux. You can see the menu graphics are a little bit different, but everything is in the same order in the same place. Debian Live, similarly, you can see the multi-level menus there. Linux Mint 22, the cinnamon stuff. This is where you can see Andy's Ham Radio Linux is highlighted, and I scrolled the right part of that screen down to see some of the applications, but they're not organized the way I tried to do it with the multi-level menus. And Kubuntu similarly with that. It seems like it only supports one layer of menu. So what I wanted to do is at a very high level go through these menus. I'm not going to talk about every piece of software that's in there because there's, what, 70 or 80 pieces of software in there. But I wanted to highlight a few that I thought would be of interest and at least show you what's here, because we're all interested in different facets of the hobby. And I tried to gather software that would cover a lot of different interests. So the first couple of menus that I've opened up, one is the antenna related menu, and the other one is for folks that are interested in CW. So let's look at those for a minute. So one of the programs that I've decided to highlight is one that I wrote from scratch many years ago called FL MoxGen. And this is for people who want to design a Moxon rectangle antenna. And if you feed into it the desired frequency, your wire gauge, and so forth, and hit the calculate button, it will tell you the dimensions of the antenna. The software will also let you create a PDF file, which you can print and bring to your garage workshop, wherever you're going to build this. And it will also create a file for the antenna modeling software, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And that was a quick little bit. So here's the antenna modeling software, which has indeed read in the file that FL MoxGen created. You can see on the far right, that's a Moxon rectangle antenna vertically oriented. And you can see some of the data. It shows the radiation pattern in the middle, and it will show front to back ratio and so forth in the other screen. If you had a bigger monitor, you could spread these out so they wouldn't overlap each other and do some analysis to see if this antenna has the characteristics that you desire. For CW, this is a new edition. I put in Morse Runner. Now, this is the community edition. And yes, this program was written for Windows, and I had to look at it very, very carefully to make sure that it really was free and open source software, and it is. And there's no binary things in there that I can't recreate. There's no DLLs or anything like that in there. So I fired up Wine, and I ran this program under it, and it seems to be pretty robust. So I decided to include it in Andy's Ham Radio Linux for folks that want to do a simulation of, what would it be like if you were running a field day doing Morse code, or any one of the contests that are supported. A lot of contests are supported in here. And you can set all sorts of things. It simulates lids, it simulates QSB, and all sorts of other things. And I think it's a pretty realistic simulation, so I put it in here for folks to enjoy. Now, recently I was contacted by a representative from ARRL headquarters who does the Teachers Institute, Steve Goodgame, and I was asked to put some pieces of software in here because, as it was explained to me, the Raspberry Pi and ham radio software and all of that is used as part of the STEM program and helping teachers to teach that stuff to their students. So I put the programs that they requested into this menu called ARRL Teachers Institute. Now, these programs live in other menus as well, but I did this because I thought it would be convenient when they're teaching the teachers to find everything in one place. So I did that for them, and I hope that they find that useful. I put some pieces of documentation on here, and but not all. There's so many programs, you're probably best off to go to the internet if you have a problem with a piece of software or just don't know how to configure it and use it. And I appreciate that not everybody will know that some of these programs have command line documentation and others have documentation that can be displayed in the Firefox web browser. So when I put these menu entries in here and you click it, the right thing happens and you can see the documentation. And this screenshot is meant to show that. So Firefox, which is not the version from Snap, it's the real version of Firefox, because the Snap version was too encumbered. It wouldn't let me access local files, for example. So I explicitly took out the Snap version and put in the unencumbered version of Firefox. Yes, there are security ramifications. I think you'll be okay. And so you can see here where there's a bunch of how-to guides and so forth that I created. And down below is a small terminal window showing the man page for a program called IBP. And this will, either way, whatever the documentation is, the right thing happens, and off you go. So in the digital modes menu, there's an awful lot of programs, and I think a couple of them scrolled off the bottom of that menu. There's what I affectionately call the FL family of programs. That's Dave Freeze, W1HKJ, has written these. FL Digi is probably the most commonly known, but these other programs are companions with that. FL Message and FL ARQ and AMP and so forth. They all can work together to accomplish different things. FreeDV for digital voices in here. That's the free software codec that is available, and the M17 is using that codec as well, codec 2. Grid Tracker, excellent piece of software, is included in here. Lots of people doing FT8 will use it, but it could also be used for people on 6 meters chasing the Fred Fish Award. Anybody who wants to track grids for any reason, that software is most excellent at doing so. There's stuff in there for slow scan TV. WSJTX is a program that people use for FT8 and so forth. So people who have done FT8 are probably familiar with WSJTX. It runs on the 3 major operating systems. Joe Taylor and company have created this software and have supported it and enhanced it over the many years. And this is a screenshot that I took fairly recently on the 20-meter band, where the waterfall is down below and the contacts are decoded in the upper part of the screen. And I'm guessing most people have probably run FT8 and are familiar with at least, if not this program, a program like it that does FT8. And this is Grid Tracker, Grid Tracker 2. They've come out with some improvements recently, and they're calling it Grid Tracker 2 now. And if you have a really big monitor and you can put this map on there while you're running WSJTX, it really gives you an excellent picture of what's going on. You can see green lines on the map that show a QSO between 2 people. You can see all kinds of boxes on there. The red boxes are grids that I've gotten confirmed, and other boxes on there are indicative of folks calling CQ or things that were not confirmed and so forth. So it gives you an idea of where your signal is going by the number of people that you've contacted, depending on what time of day you operate. And also the gray line is shown as well. Contacts are logged immediately to Logbook of the World or EQSL or whatever logging service you tell it to send it to. And the window down below, which is a little bit truncated, will show you folks that are out there calling CQ or talking to other people. And I have it configured because you can filter it in a lot of different ways. I have it configured for grids that I do not have contacts in and DXCC entities that I have never contacted. And those are highlighted there, that first line. Person in Angola, Delta 2, I think it's Uniform Yankee, I can't quite read it, but that person's from Angola, and I've never gotten that country on this band. So there's a lot of information there. Once you get used to it, you can glance at it very quickly and see who you want to contact to meet whatever goals you have. Electronic design is an active part of this hobby. Sometimes people want to draw schematics and printed circuit boards and other things for kits. Sometimes folks are homebrewing different things where they want to wind coils or program Arduinos and that sort of thing. So I put some software in here to assist people who like to pursue that part of the hobby. So here's an Arduino window. Anybody who's programmed Arduino will be familiar with this. And this is one of the example pieces of code that shows up in the user interface. And inside here, you can write your code, and through the menus, you can load it into your particular Arduino device. And when you reset it, it will run your code and blink lights or move your satellite antenna or whatever you've programmed it to do. You can do that pretty well with this. Folks who have played with micro-BitX radios from India will be familiar with this. Arduinos are inside those radios, and that software can be reprogrammed, or you can download somebody else's version of software for the micro-BitX. And I had a lot of fun a few years ago doing that, incorporating a voice synthesis chip inside of my micro-BitX. Unfortunately, that chip is EOL, but it worked pretty well. My goal was to design it for visually impaired hams, but it was too expensive to produce. But I had a lot of fun learning about Arduinos and radio internals doing the project. Well, for folks who want to wind their own coils, maybe you're building a crystal radio or some other circuit, perhaps you're winding them for a low-pass filter and whatnot. This program is very helpful to get you in the ballpark of how many turns of wire of a specific gauge do you need to get close to the desired inductance for your circuit. And what I've learned is always put 3 or 4 turns on that are extra and measure it. You can take turns off, but it's hard to splice wire on when you've done it wrong. You'll have to start all over again. But this program has helped me get pretty close. So I don't know what this is a schematic of, but I found this online, and this is for the KiCad software. Some people would say KiCad. However you pronounce it, it's here for your use. And people that want to draw schematics at this level to represent their circuit, the software is all in place to do that. HF propagation. We always want to know what is the likelihood of our signal to get from point A to point B at any given time of day or season, or where are we in the sunspot cycle and so forth. So I've put a few programs in here that should assist with that. Some of them are links to internet sites such as PSK Reporter and VOACAP. Others of them are standalone programs that you can run on your own computer. And there's a new addition in here, and it's called Ham Clock. And a lot of people are really enjoying this program. If you look at the user's guide, you will find that this program has an awful lot more in it than meets the eye. And I would encourage you, if you run this, to explore all the different things that this program can show you. I know people run it on dedicated Raspberry Pis and put big displays in their ham shack, because this does look pretty cool on a big display. And you can find out all sorts of things about radio propagation, contests, who's on the air, what's going on with the sun, and many, many, many more things. So I would encourage you to play around with Ham Clock and see what kind of information it'll give you. And you can configure these multiple different panes, I guess you'd call it, inside this window to show precisely what you want, or you can put it in demo mode where it will cycle through a lot of different modes and displays that it has built in. VOACAP goes to the voacap.com website, and I find this to be really useful to find out, like, what is the likelihood of me contacting, in this case, South Africa, on various bands at various times of day. And that circle chart on the left shows a prediction of what is the percentage of likelihood that you would succeed in making that contact. And I find this really handy. De-expeditions are out there. I want to know, when am I likely to get them? And it is just a prediction, but it tends to be reasonably accurate, and it's pretty easy to use. Okay, most of us, if not all of us, are probably logging our contacts in some sort of logging software, and there are a few choices here that I've put in from the things I have found on the internet, and one of them is brand new, which I will talk about. So CQR log has been around for quite a few years now. It is a contest quality logger, or at least people tell me it is. It uses a database to store all of its information, and it can talk to the internet and download things and fill in the blanks while you're logging the contact. And this is a fairly sophisticated logger with all kinds of features and things in it that are supposed to be of interest and usefulness to contesters. You could use it as a casual logger as well, but I don't think that's quite the target audience for this. I understand in the Windows world, there's a logger that people use called N1MM, and I'm going to guess that's the person's call sign who wrote it. I've never used it, but somebody created Not1MM, which I gather is a rewritten sort of a knockoff of N1MM. This is written in Python, so it is free and open source software, and I haven't used it except to just put up the screenshot here and fill in a couple of blanks. But apparently it's kind of popular, and I put it on here. I'm curious to see how many people use it. And the venerable Xlog program, which has been around for at least 20 years, I took over support of this software, 10, 12, 14 years ago? I forget. When the gentleman from the Netherlands who originally wrote it was looking for a new owner because he wanted to go do other projects. And I sent this gentleman an email with my credentials and why I wanted to take it over. And I waited 4 or 5 weeks. I didn't hear anything. I figured he had given it to somebody else. And then he sent me an email, said, Andy, it's all yours. Nobody else asked for it. So I've been supporting this software ever since. And all I've really had to do to it is update the part of the software that creates an ADIF file. When that specification changes, I update this software accordingly. And this is the logger I use on a daily basis. I've used it for field day for 13 colonies, and it's more than just a casual logger, but I suspect contesters would want more features. But it's also in a flat text file, so if you make a mistake, you can fix it with your editor. For emergency communications, there is an alternative to WinLink, and I've heard this pronounced NBEMS or NBEAMS. But either way, this is the acronym for the software, Narrowband Emergency Messaging System. And these are programs that are available in other directories, but it's centered around FLDigi and the ability to send these formatted messages that the MCOM community uses. FL Message has templates of those messages that you can create, and FLAMP ensures that the message is sent error-free with this ping-ponging type of protocol between the source and destination ham radio operators and their computers. Interestingly, this does not require any sort of infrastructure to be working. It's just if ham radio is working, then this stuff can work. And so many MCOM folks will choose this as opposed to other alternatives that are out there. It runs on all 3 major operating systems. It's free and open source software, and it ties in with the Silfeed email program for people who want to send very short email messages. Another area that is of interest to people is rig control, and I found a few rig control programs out there. Chirp is a very popular one that runs on multiple operating systems, and people mostly use it for programming their HTs or perhaps their mobile rigs in the car. And if you go in there and make entries in something that looks very much like a spreadsheet, tell it what kind of radio you have, and if it's a supported radio and you hit the appropriate buttons, it will program all of that stuff into your radio. Because in my experience, programming an HT based on its front panel is tedious at best, and doing more than 1 or 2 of those is just not worth the effort, in my opinion. But Chirp does a really, really good job of this, and it supports a large number of radios, and that number is growing. So take a look on the Chirp website. If your radio is supported, I think you'll like this program. Other programs that are in there, FL Rig, also written by Dave Fries, WNHKJ. G-Rig, I don't know who wrote it, but it's another rig control program. And WF View, which is very good for ICOM radios like the 7300 and the 7610. And here's a picture of WF View. No program like this can give you every capability of the radio in the graphical user interface. There's just too many knobs and buttons and things to access. But the author of this program picked what was believed to be a useful subset, and I found that to be so. And this is the program running connected to my 7610. I was looking at the 10-meter band one day, and this is what I saw. And all the controls that I've used as on a cursory level seem to work just fine. I had no issues with this. Satellites. I did satellites quite a bit early on in my ham radio journey. I don't do them so much now because while I have a nice house with 3/4 of an acre of land, I have a lot of trees on it and they block the view to the horizon, and I don't get such good signals from the satellites anymore. But I know people who do it, and sometimes I join them to see if they can make contact with the ISS or other satellites that are up there. But there's a few programs that I put in here, and the Sat Dump program is new. I don't have a screenshot for that one, but it's a new one that I put in. I believe it was the Teachers Institute that asked me to put that one in. GPredict and the Fox telemetry program have been in here for a while. And then the NOAA APT program is for people who want to aim their antennas at the weather satellites and decode the images that come out of those satellites. So the Fox program has a lot of satellites that are up there, and this program is used to analyze the telemetry data. And I believe there's a setting in the software that will allow you to send that data to AMSAT so they can keep track of the health of the satellites. GPredict is a program that's been around for a long time that I used quite a bit. Not only does it show you where the satellites are, what the path will be in the sky over your home when the satellite comes through. It will talk to rotator devices as well. And I built a simple homebrew rotator that talks to GPredict, and it aims at the satellites and does a good job of that. It's a more mature piece of software, but I found that it works very well. Software-defined radio is something that a lot of us are getting into, and it's hard for me to put software-defined radio stuff in here only because there are so many different SDR devices out there. It's hard to compile in support for all of them and not have something that just explodes in size. So I've taken a sampling of programs. I hope that the ones that are in here will work with your device if you try to do that. But many of these, some of them came from the repository. Some of them I supply the source code because the program isn't in the repository. So you might have to dive in and recompile one or two of these to use the device that you have. But I wanted to put something in here that was representative of this part of the hobby. So with GNU Radio Companion, for example, you can quite literally draw a block diagram of your signal processing application and connect the boxes, right-click on them, and define the characteristics of the box. So for example, if you have a box in your block diagram that represents a filter and you right-click it, you can choose the skirts of the filter and the filter width and so on and so forth. And this is all done in software. GNU Radio Companion will write Python code and execute it for you. You don't have to know any Python code or anything to be able to do this. You just need to know how to draw the block diagram and configure each of the blocks. And when you do that, you will get a computer simulation of your activity. But it's more than a simulation, because if you plugged in like one of those simple RTL SDR dongles that they have out there, you can actually receive a signal from the dongle, feed it to the software, process it, and then have audio come out your speakers, for example. And this software does so much more than I can even touch on in a short presentation like this. It is very sophisticated, and I would suggest that if you're interested in this, give it a try. There's a lot of tutorials that are available online to assist. And one of the tutorials looked like this. I just copied this from a tutorial and put it in there. And if I'm not mistaken, this was for FM broadcast radio. So I put my SDR dongle out there. I hook up an appropriate antenna. An FM radio signal comes in. This thing decodes it, and I hear it on my speaker. Another program that's out there is called GQRX, and this is a little bit simpler, but it works very well if you know where you want to tune and what is the mode of the transition. Is it transmission? Is it AM or FM, or what is it? It's not for FT8 and things like that, but it does have a couple of supported modes you can see over on the right. You set your frequency, and you'll probably recognize this frequency as NOAA weather. And there are a couple of stations that are local that come in pretty good, but I tune to the best one in the middle, and I can listen to that broadcast through my computer. Now, there's a category of stuff that I wasn't sure what to call it, so I call it tracking. And these pieces of software, when you listen with your radio and your SDR dongle, will track certain types of objects. So Zaster has been out for a long, long time and works with APRS and can track many types of objects that put out an APRS signal indicating their location. Virtual Radar Server is a new one that I put out there that tracks airplanes. And I live reasonably close to Logan Airport, and I have a screenshot that shows a couple of airplanes that I tracked one day. AIS Catcher is one that I didn't get a screenshot for, but if I remember correctly, that one tracks ships. And here's a screenshot from the virtual radar server. I hooked it up to my antenna one day, and it didn't take more than 5 minutes for these images to appear on the map in the program. And you get information about the airline, the flight number, the type of airplane, its speed, on and on. It's really kind of cool to see this, and it updates in real time. So if you can hear with your radio and antenna the signal that the airplane is putting out, then it will add it to the map for you. So that's a very high level description of the software that's available, the different categories, and so forth. That's what's in there today. And I'd like to let people know what is the status of Andy's Ham Radio Linux as we go forward. So the first release I did was in May 2011. And since then, I've had 34 different versions come out, up to the most recent one here a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. Now, I counted those based on, some releases had 32 and 64-bit versions, so that counted as 2. And I've just been mostly numbering them numerically, but some of them were so similar that I just changed the letter. So like version 26, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, etc. Those are close, but with updates to most of the software. There's really no rhyme or reason for that. That's just how I chose to do it. But compared to the past, as I mentioned, more Linux flavors are supported. Raspberry Pi is supported. I find a Pi 4 with 2 gigabytes to be a little bit sluggish, but that depends what software you're running and how many resources that software takes. The Pi 5 with 8 gigabytes seems to scream right along. At this point, as part of the status, I want to thank the community. There's a couple of sections on the SourceForge website where people log bugs, they request features and discuss either things that they don't think work right or other areas of interest on Andy's Ham Radio Linux. And I'm very thankful to the community for this feedback, because if folks don't tell me what's good and what's bad, I can't fix it. And if it's a bug that I've introduced, well, sure, I'll try to fix that and put out a new version, or at least put out a workaround. Sometimes there are bugs that I didn't introduce, but users are finding, and I will try to find a workaround for that until such time as the issue is resolved. But people are actively reporting bugs. This is really good. One bug was kind of a strange one that I couldn't find a solution for, but I did find a workaround, and I don't believe I introduced it, but just the same, I'm glad the user reported that. Users are very active about suggesting new programs to put in. And that's great, because I don't know of the existence of some of these programs, and they're in here because people requested it. But like I said, I'm very careful to make sure that anything that's in here is free software, open source software, or equivalently licensed. I'm not interested in putting proprietary software in here, and I don't think legally I can redistribute somebody else's proprietary software. Now, if you wish to install that on your computer, I've not done anything to stop you, but I'm not going to distribute stuff like that either. So I have to be careful, especially with the Windows-related stuff that might work on Wine, because of DLLs and other binary blobs for which there's no source code. I won't distribute those. And I had to, unfortunately, say no to somebody who requested a program that had some of that in there. And from my perspective, interest in Andy's Ham Radio Linux seems high. And I'm basing that on the number of downloads that people are doing of this. And I've joked that 3 or 4 people are very persistent in trying to download it and their internet connection breaks. But I suspect that the truth might be that actually there's a lot of people interested in downloading it and trying it. So I remain enthusiastic about this effort. I'm not getting bored with it. I'm not becoming apathetic or anything like that. I'm trying to continue to improve it, and I want the user community to be happy with the result. Here's a chart that I pulled off of SourceForge perhaps earlier today. This is just for version 26C, the most recent version that I put out on the 18th or 19th of January. And it's already got 600 downloads, and that's a big number for Andy's Ham Radio Linux in such a short period of time. So I want to thank the user community for their continued interest in this, and continuing to download the updates. So overall, since 2011, I created this chart that shows the number of downloads per version. And when I had versions A, B, C, and D, I added those all together and just put one line on the chart here. And you can see how some versions have had large numbers of downloads. In the very beginning, it took a while to take off. But I'm very encouraged about these numbers. And I hope that I'm able to create a sufficiently high quality product that people continue to download it and use it. So a couple of years ago, SourceForge sent me an email that I did not expect. And they gave me a little PDF certificate that said, congratulations, your software collection has achieved 100,000 downloads. And I was kind of blown away by that. And that was very pleasantly surprising to me. And so the local folks in the ARRL section here, the Eastern Mass section, wrote a little article about that to let the rest of the ham radio folks know about it. And I put the link for that article right here. I believe it's still available. But thank you to all of you who have downloaded this and tried it and kept it, downloaded the updates and so forth. I really appreciate that. So SourceForge, sourceforge.net, search for my call sign or Andy's Ham Radio Linux. The big green download button will get you started. And of course, you're going to read the Getting Started guide and send me email when you find my typos. Then I can fix them. Online, if you look for videos, you will see a video of the RATPAC talk that I gave in 2022. And as soon as I get the link for this talk, I will update that in future slideshows that I do. The last couple of years, I have been privileged to be a presenter at Dayton. And I'm 2 for 2 in attendance and 2 for 2 in being allowed to present there. And I will be there in 2025 in May. And I have requested a speaker slot, but I don't know if I'm going to get one yet. So if you're at Dayton, please come over and say hello. Let's chat. I'm curious what your experience is with Andy's Ham Radio Linux and what facets of the hobby interest you most. There are other YouTube videos out there for Andy's Ham Radio Linux. There's a couple of them where people kicked the tires on it and reviewed it and so forth. And those are all good. I don't think anybody has yet done a review of version 26C. So if you find such a YouTube video, please send me the link because I'm curious to see what people think of it. And this really is the last slide. I've sent the slides to someone in RATPAC. I'm sorry, I've forgotten who, but the slides are available. You can request them from me at that email address. I'd be happy to share them. And I want to thank you for coming to the talk and or watching the video. And with that, I will take questions. But I always say, folks, have a lot of fun. And 7-3.
Okay, we are now open for questions. And we got a hand up. Go ahead, Gene.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is November 3 X-Ray Uniform Sierra from glorious Killeen, Texas. Number one, outstanding presentation on a Linux program that Linux, I have absolutely no knowledge of it whatsoever. Number two, I do have a laptop that I put Linux Mint on, and that's pretty much all I've done with it. With that in mind, with Linux 2 on it, maybe I missed some steps here, but what would I do next with Linux Mint already on that laptop?
Okay, Gene, the details I explicitly did not go into in the talk. They are described in the Getting Started document, and it entails downloading the file with the big green download button. That's the first step. And the second step is you would have to open the terminal window and type a few commands. Now, I've listed in great detail exactly what command to type and what to do there to extract the software from the single tar-g zip file into dozens, hundreds of files that are scattered across. Well, I'll say hard disk, but it could be SD card or whatever you're using for storage. And if you follow those steps as I've outlined, about an hour and a half to 2 hours later, the software will be installed, and you would reboot and then go through the menus. And if everything was good, all that software should be working. Now, folks have asked me, why does it take 1.5 to 2 hours to install 70 or 80 programs? And the reason is twofold. One, because there's a lot of stuff there, but two, a reasonable percentage of that software is compiled from the source code. And some of those compiles take a while. And your mileage varies based on if you have a brand new computer that's screamingly fast versus a 10-year-old laptop. It will take longer to compile, but it does work. So go away, have a coffee or whatever beverage you like, and peek at it every now and again to see if it's asking you a question. And at the end of it, you should be all set. But sometimes you get the uncooperative computer and you might need a hand. Send me an email or post something on SourceForge, and I will help if I can. Gene, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. One last question. Will other elements of Linux be available, such as search engines, LibreOffice, OpenOffice, all those other type of things that I have on Linux?
Well, that depends on whether or not you've installed them. Now, I believe you said you installed Linux Mint, and
Yes.
I don't know exactly, but I strongly suspect that the kinds of things you're talking about have already been installed. But if not, you could go in and install, LibreOffice, or the search engine stuff is wherever you go on the internet with the browser. There are browsers installed on Linux Mint, I'm sure. So I believe the answer to your question is yes, that stuff, if it's not installed, it's easily available. But no, I didn't include like OpenOffice, for example, as part of Ham Radio Linux, because that's not strictly a ham radio related program.
Oh, I already have those type of apps or programs on my Linux Mint box, and I just wanted to know if they would go away or if they would stay there.
No, they would stay there. And if they don't stay there, that's a bug. Now,
Right.
if you've installed, let's say, FL Digi, and then you pull up Andy's Ham Radio Linux, well, I'm installing FL Digi also. I doubt there would be a conflict, but you might have two copies of it out there sucking up some disk space. But other than that, I wouldn't expect there to be an issue.
All right, thanks a lot. You answered some great questions. I took a lot of notes tonight too. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
Okay, Barry, get you on here. What we got going on in chat? Anything?
Chat. No questions in chat.
Okay. Any more hands up? Hands down? Andy,
Great attendance, Dan. See who's still awake.
Okay. Well, this has been, wait a minute, we got a hand up here. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, Andy, I was wondering when you were talking about like possibility of multiple installs, do you like build and install to say a separate directory for all of your the things that you're bringing on board, or because I know a lot of times when you do a make, you can say, okay, but my prefix is gonna be like my directory / local or something like that.
Right. So, Chris, that's an excellent question. So, some of the software in Andy's Ham Radio Linux is installed from, in this case, the Ubuntu repository. And
Okay.
so that's just a simple, command that's usually just a couple of lines long to do that. And so I wouldn't expect there, I think it was Cal who put a text in there about, are there conflicts with libraries and ham-lib versions and so forth? If one installs software from the repository, there shouldn't be such conflicts. But yes, it's a computer and there might be, but I wouldn't expect there to be. Now, as I mentioned, other programs are compiled from the source code. And when those install, they go into the user local directory tree, which is not supposed to be touched by programs that are installed from the repository. So user local is pretty safe. So for example, if I install FLDigi, if I'm compiling the source code, it would be in user local bin. If it's installed from the repository, it would be in user bin. So there would be two copies, but they shouldn't conflict. And in cases where I'm compiling from source code, I'm also installing libraries which are coming from the repository. I don't think there's anything where I compile a special version of the library from source. And so user local is a safe place to put those. And there's a couple of programs written in Python that actually install in your home directory, which feels like it goes against the grain of Unix-like operating systems to install at the system level, but indeed that's what they're doing. And I had to go through some effort to make sure that those things installed correctly for you. So that would be in your home directory in a subdirectory called .local, and then underneath that there's a few other directories where the Python stuff goes. And that's the three places where things would go. And that's why I don't think there should be a conflict, but if somebody finds one, let me know. We'll see what we can do to resolve it.
Okay, so I'm guessing that what I probably want to do then is make sure that user local bin is in my path before everything,
Yes, and it should be, but if it's not, that's an easy fix.
Yeah. Yeah, just change the profile. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And
Okay.
Cal is making a note here about the C library. And I don't touch the C library. That comes from the Ubuntu repository or the Debian repository. And if there's any issues there, we've got much bigger problems because lots and lots of programs use the C library. I don't do anything to change it or update it or anything else.
Yeah, usually what happens is when another program updates it and then something breaks. HamLib's been a real problem for me at times. In fact, I got so stressed out over it and trying to deal with it, I finally started just building my own JS8 call with a statically linked library just so it couldn't break.
Right. Yeah, I've run into that too a couple of times, and your solution is one that certainly works, but not everybody in the community has that level of expertise to do that.
Sure.
And so, as far as I know, the stuff that I've installed that uses hamlib doesn't have such conflicts, but I can't swear to it because I don't use all of the 70 or 80 programs that are in there.
Oh, whacker.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, I think most of the time the problem would be if somebody installed something third party. If they stick with what, especially just stick to the ham apps that are on your distribution, then the chances of conflicts are very small. So,
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put some more hands up. Good conversations and good questions here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it, Andy. I love the last version, and now it really looks great.
Well, that's great,
I've
Cal.
tried a lot. I've tried a lot of these ham distros, and your last one was my favorite, just in terms of content. And this looks so much better. I'm really thrilled to try it.
Cool. Thank you, Cal. Appreciate that.
Yeah. They're looking for some more people with questions, comments. Anybody got any comments or whatever? Okay, Barry, I'm checking on you. How you doing?
Put in chat, Happy Chinese New Year to everybody. The year of the wood snake.
Okay, Barry. You can always count on Barry to keep us.
Right.
Okay. Well, that being the case, we've done our hour in this, and it looks like that we go farther if there was questions, but there are not. So we'll say 73s. Andy, again, thank you ever so much.
Thank you very much, Dan. It was my pleasure and privilege, and I had a great time, and I hope all of you did as well.
All for coming.
Can you send me your slides after this?
I certainly can, Dan. K7REX. I'll do that.
Hey, sounds good. All righty. With that, I'm going to say 73s, and we have another one coming tomorrow. So see you guys tomorrow. 73s, everyone.
Thanks, everybody, in 7-3.